Gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I was talking to nobody for about 30 seconds there because I forgot to hit start live stream. So, as you can see, technology is amazing, and I'm finally here. We are down here in the dungeon, the gym dungeon. I have a super awesome guest today that I haven't talked to in many, many years, but I'm super excited to get catch up with. Um, but first, I wanted to talk to everybody and see how our weeks are going. Just to let you know that my stream is on a 30-second delay. So if you type a question in the chat, I may not get it right out of the gate, only because the way StreamYard works is it gives a 30-second delay. I don't know why, but I will get your comments. So please leave them aplenty. Um, I wanted to shout out a couple people. We are running a fitness challenge on my YouTube page, and pretty much everybody but me has finished the fitness challenge. So I want to shout out Chesney. Chesney, she got her medal for finishing her fitness challenge. I want to shout out Mike. Mike, I think you're in the stream today. Mike for finishing their fitness challenge, and Chesney actually got two medals because she's just a beast, and she got another one for finishing a second challenge. I'm sorry to hear that. Hey, it's Mike is in the building. Hey, Mike, I'm sorry to hear week is rough. Yeah, week was rough for me. I missed out on like about a week and a half of workouts because I had surgery last week. Don't worry, nothing crazy. Let's, without giving you all the gory details, let's just say two kids is enough for me. Okay, I'll just leave it at that, and that's all you all need to know about it. Okay. Um, but I'm here. I survived, I think. Unless this is all a dream, and in which case I'm cool with that too, because who knows? The Matrix was a good movie, right? But I wanted to talk to you guys and see your weeks are going good. Let's see what I did this week. Besides just sitting mostly, if you don't know, I am a school teacher by day. So this week was the week that the staff came back to the school, and then starting Tuesday, all of my little kids come back to school. And if you don't know, I teach kindergarten through eighth grade. Good morning, Daniel. I teach kindergarten through eighth grade, elementary school physical education. So yeah, pretty much everything in my life revolves around fitness. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is for those of you who don't have your entire life revolving around fitness. Some of the things we're going to talk about with my guest Erin today is, well, we're gonna hear her story because her story is pretty incredible. I've heard it a million times. I might have to mute it because I'm gonna cry when I hear it again. And then when we hear her story, and if you have questions, if I'm not mistaken, she's a pretty open book about questions with it. So if you have questions for her, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then we're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to talk about trauma informed fitness, how to work out and not be consumed by trauma. We're going to be talking about how to set reasonable fitness goals for yourself. What's up, Ricky? Good to see you, brother. And how we can take those reasonable goals and turn them into things that actually work, as opposed to the things that we usually do, which is set astronomical goals for ourselves and then don't live up to them and then get sad and end up worse than we were. And then we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things. But Philly is good. Philly is always good. It's always sunny here in Philadelphia, if you hadn't already known. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring out my good friend Erin. Okay, now Erin and we went to high school together. I've known Erin since I was probably like 14, 15 years old, and we kept in contact for most of the time. But let's go ahead and add her to the stream. Hello, Erin. How are you?
Hey, what's up? I'm good. Yeah, it would be sunny here, but it's smoky instead. So,
Oh no! Oh, that's right. Erin is out in
yeah.
California. I'm not on the East Coast. I ended up here. She decided to stay there, unfortunately. But yeah. So what's up, Erin? Thanks for jumping on here. Can you let's just get it out of the way. Can you tell us your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we'll see if I cry too. I always used to hear women say that like they lost their modesty after they gave birth to their first child, and I feel like I gave up my like hang up about crying in front of people when my husband died. So, spoiler alert. That's where this is going. But it's okay. And I shouldn't have needed that permission to be able to cry in public, but I
Yeah,
did.
you don't.
Um, but yeah, so as Aricio said, we went to high school together. We were in junior ROTC, and that is where I met my husband, Sam. So we were 14 and 15 on our first date. It was like over the summer before his sophomore year and my junior year. And basically, we were high school sweethearts. And there was a brief, about 5 months or so, that we broke up. Like the summer after I graduated high school, he was a year behind me. And then when we got back together, kind of early fall, it was like there was no turning back. We were kind of miserable people without each other. Our families definitely agreed, and it was just inevitable that we were going to get married. And um, we ended up getting married a little over a year after he graduated high school. So I was 19, going on 20. He was just about to turn 19, and um, he was joining the Marine Corps. So we had kind of done the like community college, working part time, going to school, kind of like just barely full time, like 12 units. And neither of us really knew what we wanted to do when what we wanted to be when we grew up. All we knew was it was going to be together. Um, and so, sorry, I need to let my dog out. Just come with me as I do that. Normally I leave the door open, but if you leave the door open, the whole house smells like a campfire. Come on, buddy.
It, it's like
Come on.
real reality TV here, folks. You can't
Yeah, here
script
we go.
this kind of stuff.
That's right.
It's-
I also have the Giants game on TV, playing the Braves. Although I'm paying attention to you. um,
That's what every woman in my life says when they're watching TV.
that's right. It's just on. It's muted. So anyway, so Sam decided to join the Marine Corps, and um, it's a process from the time that you like decide in like go to the recruiter's office until you actually join, especially the Marine Corps, because it's smaller. There's only 2 boot camps across the country. And so there was like 7 or 8 months kind of in between that time. And so we decided like, yeah, I guess we should get married. Like, let's just do it now. It'll be easier kind of to go in married rather than to do it afterwards. And so we got married in end of July of 2003. um, I get my dates mixed up because yeah, they're similar. Anyway, distracting dog. Sorry. So he went to boot camp, and it was kind of at the time he joined. Um, the Republican Guard had fallen. This is like kind of early days in the war in Iraq, and at that time, we were kind of predicting more of like a Desert Storm, Desert Shield kind of situation. And so we thought like maybe he'll deploy. Like by the time he would have been complete with all his training, it would be almost a year since the Republican Guard had fallen. And so we didn't really anticipate like a lot of wartime deployments. But that's what ended up happening. So his first deployment was end of '04, beginning of '05. Marines deploy typically 7 months deployed, 7 months home. And so his first deployment, he was there for the big Operation Phantom Fury, where they had like there was like a deadline to evacuate the city of Fallujah. And essentially, like if you're not an insurgent, you better be out, because if you're still there after this date, we're coming to get you. And so he was part of that. And they also did a lot of things like bringing generators and water and supplies and that kind of thing from one place to another. So his job was artillery. But after the Republican Guard had fallen, there was no need anymore for the large scale like howitzer artillery. It was much smaller, more refined type of weaponry used. And so each time he deployed, it was as provisional MPs, which basically meant they went in long convoys to take goods or people like dignitaries or prisoners or whatever from one place to another. So he did that for both of his deployments. His middle deployment was on a Marine Expeditionary Unit. So that's where the Marines go out with the Navy, float around a part of the world. They'll have like a home port. So he was out of Okinawa, and then they hung around the West Pacific. Basically, he actually did some humanitarian relief there. There's an earthquake that caused this massive landslide on Leyte, one of the Philippine islands. and they went and basically helped to recover bodies, clear roads, that then get it back to where they could be living, having a functional life again. And that was really the only thing that happened on that deployment. And then his third deployment was back to Iraq, and he basically had the option of, well, it wasn't really an option. Based on the time that he was getting out, there's like 3 months of, and Arissa, you probably did this too, like 3 months of like out processing before you actually, like, you stop doing your job to where you were actually out. And um, they would have gotten home from that deployment like right when that process would have started. So he had to extend his his enlistment 3 months in order to accommodate that. So um, he was supposed to get out like October 13th or something like that, and they would have returned home mid-October. And there was also just the timing of a lot of the NCOs. So he was a corporal at the beginning of that deployment. He got promoted to sergeant. So that's E4 to E5, depending on the branch that you're in, makes it a little bit easier. And there wasn't a lot of NCOs or a lot of guys that were getting out like just before. And so there was a lack of leadership. And so he definitely felt that like he had to extend, he had to do this and go, because if he didn't, it was going to really leave them undermanned and, with a lack of leadership. And so his other option would basically have been to extend for even longer and go on what ended up being a year-long stint with the Navy on another Marine Expeditionary Unit. So he kind of had the choice. It was, and in that time on the MU was so miserable for him because you're just sitting around doing nothing. He would rather be in Iraq and where he was actually doing something. So that's what he did. And about 5 months into his deployment, his convoy was hit by a roadside bomb, two roadside bombs. So he was the vehicle commander in his vehicle. So he basically rode shotgun. The vehicle in front of him got hit first, and they were like remote activated IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And so the first one got hit. So they were going to react to go get their guys who just got hit. And then a second one hit, and it hit on his side of the vehicle. So, the passenger side, and from what we can tell, just based on the injuries and everything, just slightly behind him. So the kid, Robert Lynch, who was sitting behind him, was killed instantly. Sam and Lynch were the only ones that were seriously injured. The other guys had some like minor wounds, shrapnel injuries, that kind of stuff, but they all just kind of got patched up and stayed in Iraq. The vehicle in front of him, though, there was only one survivor. And so it all started off. I was working at Dimple Records in Folsom at the time, and for some reason I had my phone in my pocket, and I never, if you work retail, you should never have your phone on you, right? And it just, for some reason, I'd forgotten to take it out of my pocket, and I was out on the floor straightening some things up, and my phone rang, and I recognized the number as a Camp Pendleton phone number. 760 area code 725 prefix. And I was like, uh-oh. So like that heart sinking feeling. So I go in the back and I take the call, and it was like the stay behind major, and he was telling me that Sam was hit by an IED. They didn't know how severe it was at that time. They knew that he had a broken arm and a broken leg, and then he was unconscious. And unconscious could mean a lot of different things. Fortunately, I didn't know how serious it was at that time. So, I left, and I actually went immediately to his mom's, told her, and then went home to his dad's, and his brother and sister-in-law were there as well, and told them. And it was like, so that was on a Tuesday. And then Thursday morning, got the call. He had gone they took him from Baghdad, or they were really close to Baghdad, which probably saved his life. So he was like, medevaced with a helicopter into Baghdad. They replaced, you typically have about 8 units of blood in your body. And they replaced 14 units of blood just in Baghdad. injuries all over the place, kept him alive, had to put in a chest tube. Actually, an army medic that was on site when he got hit actually provided the first chest tube before he even got in the helicopter. And so Thursday morning, he had gotten to Landstuhl Army Medical Center in Germany, and I don't even know what kind of doctor he was now at this point. One of the doctors there called me and basically told me how serious it was. He was in a coma and he might not ever wake up. And those, 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, were just excruciating, just like not knowing. It's probably better still though that we didn't know how serious it was. Just being so far away, like there's nothing.
And I and
Epitome of
it's
helpless.
like, and the thing about it is, like, this happened in, like, what year? 2004 or
7.
5? 2007. And
7,
like,
yeah.
when you think about it, like, we're in such a different culture now, in that we're like glued to our phones all the time. Like, I have to like check myself about where you're glued to your phone. And even in just this short period of like 13 years ago, 14 years ago, if people weren't just like this all day long. Like, I feel like
Oh yeah.
everyone's this all day long. So you just got information slower, which, I mean, it can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you're looking at it. But like, I specifically remember all of this happening because I feel like we've always kept in contact via social media, from like the start of MySpace to like to every like iteration of whatever it is. And I remember specifically this happening, and it was such a like it was such a like an out of body experience for me, that I can only imagine what it felt like for you, because after that happened, you basically became Sam's caretaker as well as his wife, correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
like, I mean,
Those
tell me from there.
Yeah, those first days were, well, first of all, just like for context, the iPhone came out in 2007. So, um, like I think I had a BlackBerry Pearl. I think no, I got the BlackBerry Pearl when we were in Palo Alto. So I think I might have had like it was like the
Just information,
Motorola Razor
it
or
was just
something.
slower back then. Everything was slower
Yeah,
back then. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean when during the Mew, when the disaster in the Philippines happened, I was working at a country club, and I happened to be walking through the grill area where there were TVs on, and one of the 24-hour news channels was on, and it was talking about this major landslide that had happened, and that there were Marines nearby that were coming in to provide disaster relief. And I was like, that's Sam. Like, I knew their itinerary and they were going to the Philippines. And I was like, oh, cool. So I knew from watching the news before the word got down from the command through kind of the phone tree, which I was a part of. So yeah. And then that started really during Desert Storm, Desert Shield, that whole having 24-hour news. That was the first time, in the history where you had that constant access to news.
Right. Now, just to
And so
kind of
now it's
like
even more.
just to kind of like time travel, just for, just to keep us on like a sort of set schedule. Can you tell me about what it was like going from 2007 all the way up until last year in 2020? It was, I mean, obviously Sam was in, he showed improvements. I remember seeing his improvements, and tell me, he went from what to what, like, how much did he improve? And then kind of let's round out into like last year and then right into your coaching, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, he started off basically the lowest level of a coma you can be in, and like zero reaction to anything. Like you could poke a wound and there would be zero reaction. His eyes wouldn't dilate. Like all of the like most basic things that would happen weren't happening. So his prognosis, and this was from Bethesda Naval, which is now Walter Reed and Bethesda Naval are now one combined hospital. His prognosis at that point was, if he survives, he'll be a vegetable. And so, we slowly started seeing things happening, very slow, but still very little hope from the doctors at that point. When it came time, we were in Bethesda for 5 weeks. The first 3 weeks we're in the ICU, and then he graduated out of the ICU. When it came time to transfer him to the Palo Alto VA to start rehab, The resident who was setting up the transfer had to go back down to the ICU to get some information. And one of the nurses or the doctors from the ICU said, Nichols is still alive. Like they couldn't believe that he was alive, let alone ready to go to rehab. So he had started doing things like, um, if I moved from one side of the room to the other, his eyes would like slowly track to find me. He had all sorts of like flesh wounds and everything like that. He had the right side of his body was the side that was hit. So it was also the right side of his brain that was hit. So his right side was his injured side, but his left side was his affected side. And so he basically had left side paralysis due to the injury to the right side of the brain. But he had a surgery on his elbow, so he had pins in his elbow. This split screen. It's like completely crammed in. Try to talk with my hands and they're way out of the sides. So anyway, so he had this foam thingy that the orthopedic surgeon put him in to have his elbow like in the spot that they wanted it in. And the occupational therapist had just started coming in to like do range of motion on his fingers and his hand and stuff like that. And so probably one of the very first things that he was able to do, like a command to follow, would be to wiggle his fingers, and it would just be like so slight. And there was this one corpsman, so like Navy medic, in the hospital, that it seemed like every time she came in the room, something painful was going to happen. And he had this blast wound on his butt. And in order to change him, he had the chest tube sticking out of his side. So you couldn't roll him to the side where the chest tubes were. But the wound on his butt was on the opposite side. So it was like this big rollover they had to do. So anyway, it was like this joke about like, let's flip off Doc, whatever her name was. And he just very slightly like lifted up his middle finger. And it was like, whoa.
See,
Like that was
that's
like
how I know Sam's always been my man.
yeah,
That's how I know,
yeah,
because I'm telling you, that's good shit right there.
yeah. And
And
that
yeah,
became a
yeah,
thing in OT, like we called it isolated finger extension. Um he had an occupational therapist later on
been practicing that since
who
high school. Just so you know, I'm a
yeah.
master at that, so I can train anyone for that.
Oh, Sam was way ahead of you on that. He had two older brothers, so he was practicing that one at a young age. Um, so anyway, basically, he went from zero response to anything to living a pretty good life. He needed 24-hour nursing care, um, and an ongoing therapy. So we ended up, after almost 2 years from the time he got hurt, we ended up in Granite Bay, which is in the Sacramento area, in this really great rehab home. So beautiful setting, and really great care. So when we first were there, it was only a 6-bed place. It later expanded and is now up to 15 beds, but it's still like a very like home-like environment. You don't feel like you're in like a facility, and amazing staff and very little turnover and all that. So it was a really great place to be. And then I was able to stop being a nomad as well and get an apartment and be back like in our home area and have family there all the time rather than, hoping somebody's going to visit on the weekend. Um, and so at that point, well, I mean, not at the point like when we first moved back, but just in general, like the last several years of his life, he could move his right side, less his leg. He could move it, but he didn't have very much control over his leg. But he could like do things with his right hand. He did have a tremor though. And so like the area of your brain where Parkinson's disease happens, that area was injured. And so he had Parkinsonism. So like symptoms of Parkinson's without the progressive disease state.
Right. I remember
Um,
you posting videos. Actually, I didn't know that about Sam, because I
mhm,
remember you posted videos of him, and it was incredible to watch him go from like you said, a vegetative state, which I really don't like that term, like vegetable or whatever,
yeah,
but like from that state to where I still remember the video of him playing the guitar. Like that
yeah,
sticks with me, of him when he got to play the guitar, and when he was talking to you, and him getting haircuts and all that stuff. And like it was such, from my perspective, such an amazing journey to go with you, which I mean, little as it may be, there was so many people that were on that journey with you. um and it seems like up and like he was doing so well until last year. Can you tell me what happened last year?
yeah. So for about the last year of his life, so like spring of 2019 to spring of 2020, he just kept getting sick, and there was like this mystery bacteria that was growing in his blood. So it was sepsis. He would, he would all of us, he would be fine, and then he would spike a fever, and he'd get sent to the hospital. And they do all the workups and everything. Like, so he had a trach, so he breathed out of a tube in his neck, which any device that you have, is a potential for injury. So he had a trach, and he had a Foley catheter, so an inline catheter that was there all the time. And then he often had some sort of like a long-term IV, because he was constantly needing IV therapy, or antibiotics, IV antibiotics. And he was a really, really hard stick. So getting an IV into him was really, really difficult. And so all three of those points were like, that's the first place you go to look for a source of infection. But what was crazy is that this bacteria that they were finding in his blood wasn't showing up anywhere else. So typically, like, you would pull these things, and then they would culture them, find out the bacteria that's growing, and then you're like, okay, that's what the source was. But it wasn't happening. It wasn't showing up anywhere. Well, around at some point during all of this, so we'd go to the hospital, we'd be there for like a couple weeks, go on, really serious IV antibiotics, get him well enough, usually be discharged still on the IV antibiotics. And it was just over and over and over again. And fortunately, we live really close to a really amazing hospital. And like, I'm not joking, I couldn't walk from one spot in the hospital to another without seeing somebody I know. They know me, my name, they know Sam, asking how he is, all this stuff. Especially like when I would walk, like my grandparents would come to visit or something like that, and they're like, wow, you're not kidding, like, you are really popular here. And Sam was very memorable. He had beautiful blue eyes, and just they don't get a whole lot of brain injuries, especially like war injuries, in a local hospital. So what ended up happening was there was this spot on his hip. So he was like full of shrapnel. We knew that from x-rays and everything. But other than the initial injury, when they're first like cleaning out the wounds, they just leave the shrapnel there, because it's usually is going to cause more of a problem to remove it than it is to keep it. So there was this one spot on his hip that there was like this hard, knotty area. And at one point it started to actually like weep a little bit, like discharge, like kind of coming out. And so I had mentioned, because the doctors are asking me, what do you think it is? Do you have any ideas? They're constantly asking me. And these are also doctors who've known me for years at this point, and I typically had a pretty good idea of, what was going on with him. I kept pointing to this thing. I'm like, this is the only thing that I'm seeing that's like new or different, or that could be causing a problem. And so they're looking at it, like, it doesn't look infected, like it looks fine. Like, we don't want to just go in and take it out and like risk more infection, all that. So finally it starts like really being a problem, and like started to have like we had a bandage over it, and then he gets sent to the hospital again. And as he's getting checked in, they put him in the ICU immediately, just because of his history. Like, let's just start him in the ICU this time. And as a nurse is checking him out, he looks at it, and as he pulls off the bandage, there was actually like an odor to it now. And so he had the wound care nurse come in the next day, and she was actually able to. It just kept pushing out, and it was an old piece of shrapnel. And she like was able to take some little tweezers and just boop and pull out this like 13-year-old or 13-year-old piece of shrapnel at that point. And like when he was first hurt, shrapnel would just like push itself out, and it was like a pretty normal occurrence to have a piece like not be there in the morning and then fall out later in the day. But after 13 years, we hadn't seen anything like that. And so that was like a really big deal in the hospital. Like, we had like a little specimen jar with it, and everyone was like so into it. And when I would run into people in the hospital, like, I heard about the shrapnel. I'm like, you want to see pictures? It's like our little shrapnel baby. And so we were hoping that when that came out, that like, okay, that was the source, and now we're not gonna have any more problems. And I think we maybe went like the longest stint without a hospitalization. And when I say the longest stint, I mean it was maybe like 6 to 8 weeks. I think there was one calendar month during that like last 12 months of his life that there was no hospitalization. Um, and that was like part of it. So yeah, so then they just started coming back again. He also pretty much any time that he would get sick, he would have there'd be like some pneumonia component to it. He had recurrent urinary tract infection. So like all of this stuff is always going on in the background as well. So we did a lot of reading during that time. We actually started kind of writing a memoir. I'd started writing, and I would, because he was able to speak, but it could be very laborious figuring out what he was saying. Sometimes he literally couldn't turn on his voice, so he'd be like whispering. But then also because of the just the problem with using muscles, there are some sounds that he couldn't make very well. So like an R sound was really difficult. So there were some, and so it was like constantly playing Wheel of Fortune. Like he was a really good speller. He'd always been a really good speller, and that remained. So I would just have him spell it out to me one letter at a time, or at least start one word at a time. And context really helped. So if he had something to say that was completely out of the blue, it was much more difficult to figure out what he had to say. And then just times too with the brain injury, there were times that like he was having just like a really great day, and other times where it wasn't so much of a great day. So it was really cool. I was able to get his perspective on some certain things, like okay, our wedding day, or the time, the time we whatever. So like one of them was, I knew from my perspective the story of our first date, but I never heard from him like, why did you call me in the first place to ask me out? I'd never thought to ask him that, and I asked him, and our mutual friend Paul and Jake were part of this story, and Paul actually ended up coming to visit us in the hospital that day, and so I was able to tell him like, hey, this is what Sam said about this. Like, do you remember that? And he's like, that sounds about right. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
and then and then you lost Sam last year too, because he
yeah,
was, someone with pre-existing conditions, and obviously
yeah,
we're still dealing with a pandemic, and you ended up losing Sam to COVID-19.
yeah.
And out of that, and I don't want you to have to relive the whole thing. Like, but what I would like you to do is tell me about how your role as a fitness professional, someone who is helping other people, a trauma-informed fitness professional, like how did that start? Like, because I remember it was just I felt like you hit the ground running in like with really like strong motivation, and I'd been doing this stuff for a long time, and when I saw you jump into it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I mean, like, we need more people like you. And so what are your goals as a fitness, just I don't know what you
Mhm,
call yourself, a coach, individual? Like, I know you have your Reform Health community, and I dropped the link
mhm.
to your YouTube in the chat. I'm going to do it again just in case people have jumped in. Like, what is your goal now as a fitness professional?
Yeah, so, fitness for me was a big part of how I was able to have, kind of like any sense of control, and release too. Like, I've only been in therapy for just over a year. I kind of like providentially started therapy like 3 weeks before Sam died. He died April 3rd of 2020. Um, and I I think because I'd been into fitness and had kind of gotten into endurance sports, um, the physical outlet of that, and then also like the socialization that happens with that, kind of helped me deal with things, or as I'm learning and covering in therapy, also not dealing with things.
Right. Yeah, and that can be a big
Compartmentalizing
problem
and
for a lot of us. Like, that
yeah,
that becomes my issue, is when I start doing fitness stuff when something else is going on, as opposed it turns into more of a distraction than it does a, like a means of therapy for me, because that's, for me, fitness has always been there, at least in the later years of my life. And like, I have a problem turning it off and making it not like, hey, let's not deal with all of this emotional baggage of your childhood by, running 10 miles when you haven't trained for it or something like that. Like,
yeah.
so it becomes a tough line to draw in the sand, for that. But it seems like you found a way to make it work, though.
Yeah, and it took a lot of kind of trial and error too, and doing things the wrong way for a really long time. And I spent, I mean, like 10 years kind of Um, my mom is like, "Can I be in here? You're fine.
Bring
Just
her
don't come
in.
over here."
Come in, mom. Come on, mom.
I
Let's
don't,
go.
she's not dressed for her close
Oh,
up.
I thought you meant in the stream.
Um,
Tell her to log on to YouTube or something.
oh no, she's in the same room as me.
Okay.
um, but I learned where at first I think it was a much needed escape. It started with a few months, probably, I don't even know, like maybe even 6 months after we had come back to the area when he moved to his rehab home. It started off as like I needed a day because I had been on, constantly 10 to 12 hours a day, almost nonstop. I got the flu at one point, so I was I was home for a few days. But other than that, it was like nonstop. And so I basically told the family, we were in town, so I was like, I need a day. I'm not gonna go see Sam on Saturdays. If you don't want him to be alone, that would be a great day for you to go see him. But I need to do this for me. And they, of course, all
Yeah. Yeah.
understood.
You got to take care of you
And
too.
yeah, and people have been telling me that for years. And
Mhm.
when you're in that kind of like crisis
It's
state,
hard.
people are going to be telling you that you need to take care of yourself. And at at that time, at certain points, really early on, that just felt like you're just asking me to do one more thing. um, so you kind of have to be ready to do that. And so I was ready to do that. And it started with the only thing that I need to do on Saturdays is go to the gym. And I started just like walking on the treadmill. I was doing some workout stuff. And then I ended up joining this Pilates class, which I really liked. And that turned into what is now a really, really great friendship with that trainer. And that's what got me into like cycling and endurance sports, running, and all that. And yeah, it was definitely a distraction at times, and I was burning the candle at both ends. I also went back to college during this time, got my bachelor's and master's degree in speech language pathology, like while doing Sam stuff, being with him almost every day while training for marathons and triathlons and all this kind of stuff. And so I definitely overdid it. And I'm actually really lucky that I didn't end up kind of giving myself an autoimmune disease. Like it's kind of a miracle that I don't have like Hashimoto's or something.
Yeah, I mean, you
And
can work yourself, I mean, to sickness by doing
yeah,
too much stuff without even realizing it. Like that's
yeah,
how I end up being. Is like I'm like, oh no, I can manage that and that. Yeah, yeah, give me that too. No, no, I'll get that. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I'm sick now. That's great,
yeah,
awesome. But yeah, and
yeah,
I threw this one in here just because I felt like it had something to do. Daniel had mentioned that especially mental health breaks are important, and glad for advocating for this. Like this is something that I'm learning for myself is meditating, and I've been doing it pretty routinely for the last like 4 or so months. And this is a virtual reality fitness channel, and I've been using virtual reality as a way to do that because I'm just one of those people who my brain never turns off ever, and like having to sit down and just like be stuck in my own brain and learn how to turn it off, that becomes hard for me. But when you learn how to do that, it seems like that's the hardest challenge. I know you've done a triathlon before. I've had my challenges, like I did my like ultra marathons and stuff in the past, but like the hardest challenge can become stuck with your own thoughts and not knowing how to deal with it. Like that becomes
yeah,
a big issue. And Erin, I just want you to just make sure that everyone knows that they can ask any fitness questions. And like I know Mike is in the comments saying that it seems inappropriate for the topic, but like just know that we're all comfortable with this. Like
yeah,
Erin has told this story so many times. I can drop the link to the KCRA news story that they did about her and Sam. But folks, this is still a fitness podcast or a fitness live stream. Please drop your fitness questions and anything you want to in the chat, and we're happy to answer those questions. Like, don't even worry about if it feels inappropriate for that. Okay, so like I said, this is what we do. So,
yeah.
yeah, there's been a
Meditation is
lot of
actually
yeah.
something that's been a big deal. Like, in like the last year. Like I had done it before, kind of here and there, but I wouldn't call it a practice before. It was a
It's
thing
hard.
that I would do here and there. And if I could get 2 days in a row, I was really lucky. And so now I've done it, I'd say probably like 90% of days over the last like year. And I've started to see too where it goes into other parts of my life. To get into to bring it into fitness, I'm on this like weightlifting for women Facebook group, and one of the girls asked like what do you guys do when you forget your headphones? Like, how am I supposed to work out? Sorry, my dad just walked in. Um, how are you supposed
That
to
sounds
work
like a
out like
dog.
without your headphones? And so I was like, when that happens, and sometimes I actually do this on purpose, I will actually try to make like a mindful practice out of it. So instead of listening to something, like I'm usually reading something, listening to a podcast, listening to an audiobook, watching YouTube, whatever it is. But it's so few and far between where we're actually just with our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I will do that as kind of like a mind meets body challenge for myself, and I'll work out and I'm just hearing the things that are going on me. I'm able to focus more on my body, my movements, how I'm feeling. And
Yeah, yeah, that's
it's an
become
amazing practice to do.
yeah, and that's like what I learned was that you can meditate wherever. It's not like you don't have to be sitting in a dojo, with like music playing, or like you don't have to do any of that. Like for me, I get my best meditation when I'm like challenging myself lifting or something, because like you said, breathing in itself becomes like how you meditate, or like just the motion of like, for those of you who don't know what Valsalva breathing is, or like the Valsalva maneuver when you lift weights, it's a type of thing that you use your diaphragm to pick up. Like let's say you're lifting heavy weights. It's a form of breathing in, holding it, pushing your air against your diaphragm as you're lifting and releasing at the top. And then you don't realize how loud it is until like you take your headphones off, especially like if you're like, or like PR in a deadlift or a squat or something. If you take your headphones off, all of a sudden it's like like that, and you're just like, what is this noise coming out of me? And it's just interesting, like that those noises in themselves can become like this ASMR, this kind of white noise
Yeah.
here. And I have, let's see here. I'm gonna throw Mike's question in here because he's been dying to ask this one. They've been dying to ask this one. Okay, I see workout to trigger certain muscle groups. Well, what about targeting areas where there are no muscle to trigger? Pubic mound of fat doesn't seem to be going down no matter how much weight I've lost. Yes. Okay,
You
so
can't
Mike,
spot reduce fat.
you can't spot reduce fat. Took the words right out of my mouth. So how do you get rid of that kind of fat? And so here's what I always tell like new clients that I have that come in with pictures of Instagram people, and they say, I want to look like this person and that person. And this is why my gym isn't like packed full of people, because I always am honest with people. And I go, it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why it's not going to happen is because you are born with these things called genetics, and genetics are the cells of your parents and their parents before them and their parents before them. It's the reason I am 5'7" and not 6 foot. It's because my dad was 5'8", my mom's 5'1", and I got stuck somewhere in the middle. Now, when you are working out or you have some kind of like body goals, like because body composition, I know we have this, there's this movement of like, you have to love your body exactly the way it is. Well, yes, you should love your body exactly the way it is, but there's no reason you can't also be working on your body in a way that you want to see results. Now, that being said, this big preface here is that you're going to look like, if you stay in shape, if you're eating the way you should be eating, if you're lifting weights, if you're doing cardio or conditioning, you're going to look like a combination of your parents, your mom and your dad put together. And if you're weightlifting and you're doing more than they're doing, you're going to look like a thinner or healthier version of them. So if your parents carried weight in a certain way, like we have this thing in my family called the dueñas belly. My dad has a belly, I have a belly, and the only time I haven't had a belly was when I started fighting MMA, and I would starve myself to death to make 145 pounds. And and like that was the only time I didn't have a belly, and it wasn't worth it. I'm like, give me the belly, I'll take the belly. I want to be able to eat stuff too. And that's where it all comes in, but it's not an excuse to say, okay, well, I guess I'll stop working out now. It's more like you're going to look like a combination of your parents, and that's it. So if your parents look a certain way, you're probably going to look a certain way. Do you have anything that you tell your clients who like have, because I as fitness coaches, we always get this, we always get the spot reduce thing. So what do you say to them? Because that's what I say.
Yeah, basically, in order to lose that fat in that area, you have to lose fat all over, and it's based on your genetics. Like you say, you have the dueñas belly. Wherever it's usually not the spot you want. You're going to lose fat and gain fat in spots based on your genetics. So really you would have to just get lean enough that finally fat came off of that area. So you can
And
either
usually
drive yourself
I've
crazy and starve yourself, and like you did when you were fighting and be
yeah,
miserable,
yeah.
or enjoy that you have a healthy body and just learn to accept it. Like, okay, I happen to carry a little bit of weight here. That's okay. And like you said, like it's okay to, you can absolutely love yourself and love your body you're in, and still want to change it to improve it.
Absolutely. I mean, like I always tell people, it's like a car. You don't, if you have a car that, is covered in rust and maybe gets flat tires a lot, you don't have to be like, well, I have to love my car. Like, no, you could always get your car fixed. That it's okay to get your car fixed. It's not a big deal. Cause I think sometimes with this whole like body positivity thing, which I'm totally about, it sometimes swings too far a certain direction. And people, like, I have a lot of trainers that are like, well, are you a fat positive trainer? I was like, well, that's kind of a loaded question for me. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that so much. You are awesome. I will buy us all a cup of coffee. So what Mike was saying though is go back to college and study genetics myths. No, you don't. And that's the thing, is like that's where it becomes an issue for people, is that you don't have to like learn all of this stuff. You have to just kind of learn your own body and how your own body works, because what fitness professionals do is we learn how everybody's body works. Like different people, like you can, after a while when people walk into my gym, I can tell you exactly what their self-conscious points are, what they probably don't do and don't like about themselves. And honestly, the thing that the last place you're going to lose fat in is most likely the place that you're most self-conscious about too. And it's that it
Mhm.
always is like that. I don't know why it is like that. My belly, that's my most self-conscious thing, is my belly. And but that's for everybody. So it's just to learn, um, you know, how to love while work on your own body. So you don't have to, um, you don't have to learn all of this stuff. Just learn about yourself. I don't know if meditation turns a corner, but it seems like breathing exercises seem to translate from the body to the brain and relax it. Absolutely, it does. And is like when you learn how to breathe the right way, a lot of things fix itself. Most recently, my biggest like fitness venture I've been in is rowing, and rowing had been a struggle for me. Like I'm good, I'm okay at it because like it's a lot of like movements I'm already doing. But once I learned how to breathe the way rowers breathe, it became like really easy. And like you have to learn how to breathe for running, you have to learn how to breathe for weightlifting, you have to learn how to breathe for swimming. My God, because I did a triathlon once, but like swimming breathing is like the craziest one. If so yeah, absolutely, breathing has something to do with it. Let's see here. I'm gonna throw in another one here. uh, where'd it go? Okay. Does meditation turn a corner like exercise does? Exercise not fun the first dozen sessions or so, but changes. Is meditation the same? What do you think about that one, Erin? Or are you
I
far
think it
enough along in there?
No, I am. I think it does. I think there's still going to be those times where it sucks and you just kind of like getting through it, but you know that you're going to be better off in the end. For me, and maybe this too is because like I have ADHD, and so when I first started, I just like I would like look at the time and like how much time do I have left, and just like my mind just wanted to go off in different directions. I just want it to be over with. And now, and I typically am just doing like headspace, like 10-minute headspace deals. And now I'm almost like, oh, it's over, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it definitely does. But I think especially once you've been doing it for a long time, it kind of gives you a good idea of kind of where your headspace is. Because if I'm feeling really rushed and anxious about things, it's going to be really hard for me to just sit and be quiet and focus on my breathing for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
So if I'm
absolutely.
feeling that way, that's a good indicator of like, okay, I need to slow things down.
Absolutely. There's a question for you, Erin, right there.
Yeah. You know what? So the only time I ever have, and Ari, I want to say this actually was when you were doing your podcast. You were talking about there was like a ninja fitness game or whatever. Um, I think that's what, and this was like several years ago. Um, I was kind of in a weird spot in my own kind of fitness. I was having a hard time being consistent. And so it's not it wasn't VR. I've never done
Yeah.
VR, but it was just like this app, and it was like you
You're
were a
talking about
ninja and you.
You talking about Zombies Run?
It was like that, but it was ninjas. It was,
Hmm.
yeah, it was similar, but it was a lot of like hit style kind of stuff,
Okay.
which is not typically something I really advocate for
Yeah.
myself. There's a very small percentage of people who it's appropriate for. Um, but yeah, it was fun and it gamified it and it made it for like that time when I was having a hard time um, just doing anything.
Yeah.
That gamification really made a big difference.
And I think that's one of the benefits of like the virtual reality thing is because we're seeing more and more gamified versions of fitness, which like it gets you to where it can get you to a certain spot, but after a while, like you're gonna start craving more from like gamified stuff. You're gonna be like, okay, I've conquered this game. What I want to do the next thing, and that's kind of like why I started this channel is because I want to be that next step for people to move from gamified fitness, which like I said I think is great, and then but how do you take the step from gamified fitness into like incorporating fitness into your daily practice without needing a game for it? Because I always look at it, because I'm a teacher, I always look at it for my students with fitness all the way through 8th grade. They need to be tricked, into working out. And like this is where like you have the bad gym teachers, is because they think that you can just go up to 12-year-old and say, okay, we're doing 10 push-ups, 10 squats, 10 sit-ups, and then we're running a mile, and then that's that. And then the kids are like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. But when you turn it into like okay, we're gonna have like, you're gonna level up by doing whatever, that's where it becomes like, okay, they start getting into it. And what I've had from gamifying fitness for kids is after a while they start becoming interested in sports, they start becoming interested in like weightlifting, and then they come to the master, and that's where I can just like, bang, I got you, I tricked you into liking fitness. And that's exactly why I like gamified fitness. Let me throw another question on here. I don't know if this was a question. I'm just kind of glancing at it. Finding many metric semester versus one improvements. Maybe my weight drop. Maybe the shirts fits. Did my resting heart rate drop? Yeah. Okay. So it's not a question. It's
Mm-hmm.
you're talking
Yeah,
about overall progress.
non-scale victories. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
performance based stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Like
Does my
2 months
mile time
ago when I
lower?
walked up
Yeah.
these stairs, I was, doubled over because I couldn't breathe, and now I can carry groceries up these stairs and I'm breathing fine. Or yeah, there's all sorts of those little, and sometimes you're not even something you're expecting. You just,
Mhm.
maybe you look down and you realize that you're not taking up the entire space of the seat or something, like there's a gap, or
For
what.
so for those of you who don't know about like my journey from fitness, like I was in the army. That's why me and Erin can talk about this stuff like pretty fluently. It's like I was in the army, and I was like in pretty good shape too. And when I got out, I was like, fuck this, I never want to work out again. And guess what happens when you just decide you're not going to work out again and you don't have the genetics set up for it? You get
Yeah.
really, really unhealthy. Yeah. And I ended up getting up to about 280 was my highest weight that I got up to. And like it was just a mess of depression and insomnia and pre-diabetic issues, and like just a nightmare. And it took like moving to Philadelphia to get away from toxic family and this and that. Another story for another stream. But it took getting away from that to kind of find where fitness fit into my life. And so one of the things that I found was like putting on pants that I used to wear, and like I would find the biggest pants I have, and I still have a pair of jeans that I had from when I was a much bigger guy, but like having those kind of things. But here's the struggle with that too, and I'm going to tell you this, Ricky, as man to man here, is like I went from 280 down to 165. Okay. I got there. And then after I got out of mixed martial arts and fighting. I can't wait to answer this one. Oh, I can't wait to answer this one, but I'm going to continue on mine. Okay. So after I got out of fighting, I wasn't working out like 6 hours a day. So my weight went back up to about 200. And then it became a struggle to like manage I'm gaining weight again. But if you're like lifting weights and doing the right things and gaining weight is a good thing. Like there's absolutely times where you can put on healthy weight, and it's just a matter of trying to break that psychological barrier. Because I know you've gone through that, Erin, where like you got down, and then like after lifting you get up, but in a healthy up, and it becomes like this psychological, like, oh snap, don't look at the scale, don't look at the scale, because we're so trained. That was my childhood, was my mom going, jump on the scale, jump on the scale. I have so much trauma around food and weight loss. It's bananas. Like the inside of my brain is like Beirut, like when it comes to like, bad thoughts about your body. So but I want to jump into this one. Are there really good exercises to tone your butt? And the magic word just came up, which was tone. Do you want to take this, or do you want me to take it, Erin?
I'll take it because I have an interesting perspective, I guess.
Go
So,
ahead.
like the word tone basically means your muscle's ability to be ready for action. So when we talk about like abnormal tone, like in someone with a brain injury, like my late husband, he had abnormal tone. So he had one side of his body that was basically like flaccid, like low tone. He had one side of his body that was spastic tone. I actually work with a young lady who has CP. She has spastic CP. And so her tone is something we're working against all the time. And it's actually something you don't want. You want normal tone. So we, for the most part, as long as nobody here had a stroke or has CP, probably have normal tone. So that's what tone actually means. What we mean when we say I want toned muscles is you want defined muscles. You want to be able to see your muscles, which means one, you have to have muscle to see, and two, you have to be lean enough, so not too much fat in order to see it. So by toning a
Absolutely.
muscle, it just means that you want to be able to build that muscle, and nutrition wise, you need to be able to lose fat so you can see it. So like abs
So
are kind of a good
yeah.
example, because um, you can have larger abdominal muscles that can be seen at higher percentages of body fat. If you don't have very developed abdominal muscles, you have to be very, very lean in order to see them. Some of that also is going to be genetic. Like Ari might not ever be able to have like a six pack. That's like the first place that I tend to lose weight is my abs. So I can actually have like
Dick.
pretty decent abs at a higher body fat percentage. But that's what toning means. You have to have the muscle, and you have to not have the fat.
Yep, and you said it in a much nicer way, because I always yell at everybody who uses the word tone with me, because like whenever someone says tone, the first thing I go is, there's no such thing as toning. And then I go on to what you're about to say, which was the
Yeah,
only way to tone is to grow a muscle and then also lose fat in said
yeah.
area. So that's why I advocate for women to lift weights. Every woman that walks into my gym is always scared to touch weights, and then after a while they realize that I don't want to get bulky. Don't worry, you won't. Okay. And it
Don't overeat
becomes,
and you won't get bulky.
don't, yeah, exactly. And then that solves a lot of our issues too. But like, to answer your question in a way that is meaningful, are there any exercises that are good for your butt? Okay. So when we look at exercises, this is the cheat code for how to make exercises work for your body. Okay. I'm going to take over the screen for a second. Give me 1 second. Okay. So I need the side space here on this one. Okay. Give me a second. Okay. So when we look at it, I always like to use my bicep because it's right here and it's an easy one to demonstrate this on. Okay. So if you see your bicep, this line right here, this is your bicep. Okay. When it's extended, all right, it's in this length position. When your arm is extended, it's in this elongated position. When it's contracted, it's in a shortened position. To make this muscle grow, you have to go from here, lengthened, to shortened, over and over and over again with different weights attached to whatever plane of movement you have. Okay. So I got you. I'm getting there. You can't rush me on this. I'm a diva when it comes to this kind of stuff. Okay. So to shorten that range of motion, to shorten that muscle is how we grow it, quote unquote. Okay. So exit solo. Okay, cool. I can only do so many things at once before my brain just stops working. So when we're looking at our butt, how we shorten the muscle is by bringing our leg, like let's say this is you. Okay, this is you. Okay, and then you're standing from the side. To shorten your butt muscle, you have to bring your leg back. Okay, that contracts the glute. Okay, and then to lengthen it, you have to bring it forward. So knowing this about your different muscles, and you can kind of figure this about different things. Your back, bringing your arm back shortens the muscles in your back, bringing it forward and lengthens the muscles in your back, shortens the muscles in your chest. Okay. This is how you learn fitness really quickly, Mike. Okay. So you don't have to go to college. You just have to figure out what shortens when you do what. Okay. So now taking all of this newfound information of shortening and elongating, all you have to do is throw weights on the correct plane of movement, or the plane that it's going, and boom, you have yourself an exercise. So you have to look at your different levers. I lost my thing. So here, boom, shortens here. And but if I just saw your follow up, which makes me makes everything I said just go away. I want a smaller one. We have to go back to, then you need to fix nutrition and get yourself in a place where fat is losing all over your body, and eventually it will happen from your butt. However, it is 2021, girl. You do not need to shrink that booty. Okay. So let's see here. Are there, okay, so we got the tone butt one. But it looks like that's all of our questions, my friends. Let's see here. I'm going to see if you're still in the Bay and want to try more VR. I have a hardware. I can lend it out for a couple weeks. Erin, you and Ari can do multiplayer. All right. Sounds great. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, I'm going to end this stream. It was such a pleasure having you on, Erin. It's been so many years. We need to catch up more often. And I'm going to let you go. So everyone say bye to Erin, and Erin say bye to everybody. All right. Take care,
Yeah, thank you
Erin.
so much for having me. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Take care. All right, folks. I wanted to give you a couple heads up about what's happening in the next couple weeks. I will be off for next weekend. I'll be in Washington, D.C. On a little mini vacation, so I will not have a broadcast then. However, on the week after that, I have a super special guest, which I'll be having Dwayna Olson from Supernatural on. So I'll be posting tons about that on like social media and stuff. And if you didn't catch it, here is Erin's YouTube channel. If you didn't catch it, that's for her Reform Health community. And you can always find her on Facebook. I know she interacts with a lot of her clients on Facebook. With her name is Erin Nichols. You can just look her up. She's probably friends with me on there. But yeah, I'll have Dwayna Olson on. We're going to be doing the same kind of format style. We're going to learn about Dwayna's life, her journey, and go from there. I'm hammering down if it's going to be a Saturday or a Sunday. And then once I've done that one, I'm going to be taking a break from streaming for a while, just because, not videos, but just streaming, just because the school year for me is starting and I have to dedicate a little bit more time to the job that actually pays the bills. So that being said, it's been a pleasure having you all in. Thank you all for staying and listening to Erin's story. And I will catch you all on the flip flop. Don't forget to get your workout in, folks. Have a lovely day. Bye, everybody.